Hello, hello, hello. I'm glad you guys can join us today. This is Brian Sewell and Richard James with the RJ and Sewell Talk Show. Let's talk. I think that we came up with, right? Let's talk. Glad to be here. We got special guest Tina Clark with us, our renovation VP, renovation specialist from Guild Mortgage. And we're happy to be here today. Tina, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As you guys know, we're here to, I call it the 3 E's. We educate, empower, encourage you, right? So the education piece, we're going to bring in good people that know their stuff. That's going to be able to, at least when you leave watching a video or watching a live podcast from us, that you'll be able to go in and make a better decision, whether you're in Illinois or the other 7 states where I'm licensed in or somewhere else. We're happy to help, but we want you to have good education, give you a little bit of encouragement, because so many times people can be discouraged when buying a home. And I think those 2 things empower you to make good decisions. So, RJ, what's going on, buddy?
Man, things are wonderful. Still waiting for us to get to all the way to spring. Mm-hmm. But, looking ahead a little bit, Mother's Day is coming up pretty quickly, right? And I just got a chance to spend some time with my mom last weekend. And things are busy in the agency. So things are going well. How about you?
Doing great. Really crazy week so far. I mean, I just got back. I believe in education, man. That's the thing. I get coached. I'm a coach and I get coached in. So we had a coaching event this weekend and I went to Manhattan Beach, California, which is nice weather for the most part, but learned a lot, implemented some stuff, and I will never do this again. I got on a plane at 11:55 Saturday night. And I got home at 5 a.m. I got midway at 5 a.m. Didn't get home to 6. Took a shower, served at church, and I think I've been paying for it all week, but it's been busy. So never do the whole, was it that called a red eye?
Red eye.
No, not doing that again. That's crazy. But glad to be here and can't wait. And I'm grateful that Tina decided she's going to do this with us today. And I bother Tina a lot. And she helps me out a lot. And so, Tina, why don't you give a quick background on yourself? I know you've been in the business for 25 years and you specialize in renovations and you've been a godsend. Talk a little bit about what your job intakes and a little bit of background on who you are.
Yeah, so I have been in the business overall for about 25 years. I started doing renovation loans a little over 15 years ago, probably kind of as a niche along with everything else. And then in a former life, I was given the choice to do just renovation and specialize in that, or kind of do everything else. And by the time that decision was presented, I had kind of already built a niche and really believed in the product. And so I decided to go all in, and I did. That was about 15 years ago, and I've been doing strictly renovation since then. I enjoy it. I do wholeheartedly believe in the product. I think it's grossly underutilized because folks don't understand everything that you can do with it. I mean, you've done them before, you have experience with them, you do understand. But a lot of people just don't realize, they think it's only for a house that's falling apart. And there's so much you can do with these to make a house perfect for somebody,
Yeah. I think a lot of TLC or a little TLC, I think it's probably a good product to use in a market when there's not a lot of inventory.
Oh, for sure.
So it's I think you can give a lot of good information on those things. So I've gotten the pleasure to work with you now. God, I've been with Guild now for 3 years. Jesus, it's merged. I'm like, man, it's been 3 years we've worked together. I mean, we're getting into a little bit of a good rhythm, and our clients love you. And just share, like you said, it's underutilized. Can you expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think most people think that it's just for if you're trying to buy a house that won't pass a standard appraisal and it needs repairs and you can't buy it any other way. And it is for that. I mean, it is a good loan for if it's not financeable otherwise. But I probably only do about 50% in that situation. The other 50% are for, maybe someone is at a price point where they can't find something big enough for their family. Or every house they go in, it hasn't been updated since 1972. Construction is not cheap. And to plan to do that, especially as maybe a first-time home buyer, it's a lot to put down the down payment and, to go through all the financing. And then we all have this vision of, I'm going to take care of all this in the first 3 years. And then all of a sudden it's been 5, life happened, and it never quite gets there. I think a lot of people settle sometimes for a house that meets their needs, but not the location, or vice versa. And sometimes with this program, we can give them the best of both worlds. They can get in the neighborhood or the school district or whatever it is that's important to them, but also make the house work for their family and be really what they dreamed of. Everybody watches too much HGTV, and it's not quite that magical. But
well, it's going to get to that.
That's what we want. I mean, that's what we all want, right? Is a house that is comfortable and healthy and safe for our family, for sure.
So, you brought up something there, getting the family to fit in the home that they're in. Just recently, I was working with one.
Hey, RJ, really quick. Speak up, because I'm having a hard. Are you having a hard time hearing them, Tina?
Just that last bit, yeah, a little bit.
Come up to the mic so we can hear you. We want to hear your great questions.
All right, let me talk a little bit louder. So
That's
my
good.
head's already big enough in the frame. So I was just recently working with a client who was describing when her and her husband bought the house, they thought it was their starter home. It turned into their forever home.
Mm-hmm.
They did that by adding a floor as the home or as the family got bigger. So is that some of the work that you do?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we can do these as refinances. I mean, we do, a lot of purchases for folks, like I explained, but we also do refinances just for those sorts of situations, because, again, life happens, and we think we know what's going to happen in our next 5 years, but then surprise, that's not quite where things went. And a lot of people, I mean, depending on where values are and where they qualify, it may be, and if they love where they are, now they've been in that neighborhood, they love their neighbors, they like the school district, they want to stay there. But to your point, they need more room. This is a really good option for them too. We can absolutely help with that.
Excellent.
That's a great question. So before I hit the why and when, you were kind of talking about something that tickles me a little bit, and RJ will tell you that I like to have fun. I think you know that too. I like to bust chops, right? So, one of the issues that I had, and Tina's such a blessing. This is not being reported, right? Yes, she's such a blessing. Because before I would have to do the burden was all on me, right? And when you're doing all the other loans and stuff, and that part comes in, it can become cumbersome. There's a lot of words I use, but that being said, watching the TV programs, the Fixer Uppers and Property Brothers, while those are all wonderful, I haven't watched them in a while, but I think can be a little misleading sometimes. Nothing against joining gangs and things like that, but it would always tickle me a little bit, because I was doing these renovations while we watched these shows, and they would say, "Hey, watch this." And the one that got me a little bit, I want your thoughts on this, is that Joanna and Chip would pick, specifically like, okay, why want to come up and say, "Oh, we're off on our quote," "Oh, this one's 25,000. Flip a coin. Who's going to tell them?" Right. And she, Chip said, "Oh, we're over budget by 25,000," and the client would be okay with it. Like, yeah, all right, no big deal. Now I understand contingency reserves and all that stuff, but I'm trying to think, like, when would I ever react like that? If I'm off by 25,000, I wouldn't be like, "Cool, RJ, let's go," right? Hey, we'd be pissed or upset, right?
I'd love to pay you more. Yeah, right.
A little acting going on there, but touch on the little TV hits thing, and I love all the shows, beautiful, but comparing it, reality and what they watch on TV, what's real.
Well, I think they're good and bad. So, I mean, they do give people a wish list. As the things like Pinterest, and I get those sorts of pictures, and what about this and what about that? It's a great thing to have an imagination and to want to do all those things, but it does give unrealistic expectations sometimes. Again, construction is not dirt cheap, so part of that conversation initially, and part of as we go through the process, a lot of people will do a wish list. And then, do we need to dial that back a little bit? I mean, I'd love for everybody to get everything they absolutely want. But is that reasonable? We also don't want them financially thinking of them long-term. We don't want them to overbuild either.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You don't want to have the great white elephant. I mean, you can explain that more, but.
And it's great if you're going to stay there forever, but what if you don't? You don't want to overbuild, and just from a cost-effective perspective, you want to make sure that you're being reasonable, getting what you want, certainly, but not going too far overboard based on that specific property or, your situation or what have you. So it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I think it's great to get people's minds working and give people ideas, but it does create some expectations that aren't super realistic sometimes.
Yeah, we're on the RJ and Sewell Let's Talk show. And I got the honor of having Tina Clark here, our renovation VP specialist, all of the above. Someone you like to know, right? She can give you some truthful answers. So if you have questions or comments, just put them in there, and we will try to get to them before the show is out. We can get some questions in there, but I got some that come across my desk all the time, so we'll get to some of those as well. She's breaking it down, right? When it might be the right thing to do a renovation. So some people think that if they do a renovation loan, that, and I hear this a lot, that I can't afford it because, it's going to cost me a boatload of money. Can you kind of explain that? Like explain it here. Hey, AI, can you explain it like a fifth grader? And there's a couple of jokes in there. Explain it to a fifth grader. How, that, hey, I don't have, I see this house for 300. Man, it's going to cost me $50,000 in repairs. I don't have 50,000, and that's why I won't do a renovation loan.
Right. For sure. Well, the way it works is essentially we're working off of where it's going, kind of like a new construction. We're working off the bid, plans, and specs. So we would add, say, 300,000 plus the 50,000 for the rehab. The appraisal would be done based on future value, so going in that what you're doing is supported. That is part of the process. There's no surprises that you're overbuilding necessarily. And then we're able to do normal financing off of that. So 3% down, 3.5% down for FHA. I mean, the standard percentage is down off of the entire product, the whole package. So you then have the 50,000 to make the house, whatever, can fit in the budget of your dreams, but it doesn't require the 20% down. It doesn't require you having 50,000. That is all included in the financing.
To that point, and RJ, I'm going to bring you here in a minute because I want to talk about the insurance part of it. So sometimes you're doing a streamline, a renovation 203K, and sometimes you're doing a full, and sometimes you're doing a homestyle, right? And RJ, I'm going to have you answer this after Tina answers. But when do you know which product? How do you decide that? And then after you answer that, if it's a full renovation, like a big project, RJ, I want you to talk a little bit about how that cost can be affected for the insurance, because there's sometimes where you can have the insurance be, like a normal insured property, and there's sometimes you got to get to construction piece insurance protection there too. So, absolutely. Tina, take that question first if you don't mind. When do you know it's the right time to do which product?
Yeah. So usually the reason to choose FHA versus conventional is more based on the client than it is the property. With a few exceptions, there are some luxury items, pool, detached accessory unit, some of those.
Wait, pool?
Yes, we can do
that.
That
was very popular during COVID, man. I think all my neighbors were getting one. I was like, I'm not spending $200,000 on a pool. And I do mean $200,000 on that in-ground pool. It's ridiculous. 150, 200, whatever, but go ahead.
For sure, these days, for sure. Yeah, so on the conventional program, we can do some of those luxury items. So those might be a reason to specifically use conventional, but generally speaking, we can do about the same thing for the rehab piece. So it's really a matter of, what looks and feels better on the financial end and on the regular loan financing end. I mean, how much do we have down? What's the credit score? Where are you comfortable as far as your payment? I qualify folks the same way that Brian would. So we're using the same guidelines on FHA versus the FHA rehab, and the same goes for conventional. So, it's more really a conversation, if someone qualifies for both options, which one makes more sense based on your long-term plan? Where are you going? Does it make more sense for FHA with the opportunities for a streamline refinance down the road. Does it make more sense for a conventional loan for the same reason? It's a conversation with the client, same as Brian would have on a regular loan, and we usually choose for the same reason.
So like the streamline is this, would you can go up to what, 70? What's the amount now? 50?
On FHA, 75,000, but that
75,000.
includes the contingency. We're going to pad it just in case of anything unforeseen, so there's some protection built in there. So it really means about 65 for the bid, or nothing structural. And then if we get the bigger projects, there's also an FHA option for that as well. We would just use the standard.
So thank you, Tina. So you're going to RJ when you're looking at, something small, just, little fixer upper, right? It's a smaller amount. Or if we're going in and Tina's got to do 200, 300,000 in repairs, tell us how that insurance can break down.
Yeah, so that's a great question. When you think about how we insure, you got two separate situations there. So if the person can live there during the renovation, it's probably just going to be written as a regular homeowner's policy. But if they have to move out because the home is not going to be livable during that time, we have a different type of insurance policy for that. And those sorry,
That's fine.
I know. I thought I turned it down, and
my wife got me too. She tried to FaceTime me. I don't know what was going on. I was like, "Hey, I'm on a podcast."
All right, that's a nickel for the fine jar. But if you're doing a larger project and it requires that no one lived there during that time, we have different policies. The typical homeowner's policy is an annual policy, so it's 12 months as the term. When we talk about large renovations or building projects, things like that, now we're talking about generally shorter, like 3 months at a time. The premium does tend to be a little steeper though, right? Because you have a building that's unoccupied for the most part. And when you have unoccupied buildings, interesting things happen overnight sometimes. So we do want to make sure that we have that protected the right way. But yeah, and sometimes you can actually extend the liability from your existing homeowner's policy to another property where the work may be done. So there's a few different ways that could be protected. The first thing is to have a great conversation with your insurance agent to make sure you're doing it the right way and the most cost-effective way for you.
I like that. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to add, Tina, that you see?
No, I mean, that's kind of what we see as well, is it depends on, occupancy generally, or how big the project is, or if you're actually building versus just kind of a remodel. And then, we can use the builder's risk or course of construction in lieu of homeowners initially, and then they generally convert back to homeowners policy when it's completed.
And the cost on that is it's a little bit more, right? A little bit more, but then, like you said, you revert back. And
yeah, it's meant to be temporary,
right.
Okay, Tina, touch on some hurdles. Like, what's the most common challenges or surprises that consumers face? Right, I know we've dealt with some. Right,
always something.
How to help them properly prepare. So I'm just gonna give the ball to you and let you you do your thing.
Well, so you got to remember. I mean, some of these properties, sometimes we're just doing a kitchen and a bath remodel, and there's really not a whole lot of question there, other than will the value support what we want to do and do we qualify? Sometimes we're adding. We can convert. So sometimes it's a duplex and someone wants to add another 2 units. Sometimes they want to convert a duplex into a single family. I mean, then you have engineering. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So timing and kind of wrangling all of the pieces and parts is one bit of it, which is, obviously what our team is built around, kind of knowing who the players are and what needs to be done when. The biggest challenge, generally speaking, is selecting a contractor, the client selecting a contractor.
Yeah, that is definitely.
And the contractor responding. I mean, even if they're responsive, I tell people all the time, we're mortgage. We love paperwork. We have paperwork that explains the paperwork that we're going to send you tomorrow, more paperwork. Right. We're used to it as our realtors. Contractors, not nearly as much. I mean, they have their focus is in the field. If it's a large company and they have an office and an admin, that's one thing. But if it's a smaller company, they don't want to deal with my paperwork when they're been in the field for 10 hours. And, we get that. We try to make it as simple. We do as much through DocuSign and try and make it as simple as we can. But I mean, that's really the biggest challenge probably is the borrower making a decision on which contractor initially, and then sort of getting all of those pieces together to make sure that we can accept them. Because, we check general liability insurance, we check licensing, we check references, and we make sure they've been in business for at least 3 years, because we're going to give them the client's money. So we want to make sure, some people love it, some people hate it. There's a lot of oversight on that piece, and it is a pretty thorough vetting. But I mean, at the end of the day, we are going to give them the client's money, and we need to make sure that they can run a crew but also run a business. They've been in business a couple of years, and they're not headed off to Mexico with the first drop.
So Tina, obviously when you're talking about renovations or any work on the house that involves a contractor, there's a lot that goes into it. So what I'd love for you to share is, at what point do you come in? How involved are you? So from the time I say, hey, I want to do a renovation project to our house.
Sorry, it's having a hard time. I want them to hear you.
It's just fading out a little, yeah.
From the time I say I want to do a renovation project on my house to the time I am, nobody else is in my house except for my family again. Where do you come into the process, and what role do you play, and when are you kind of done?
Well, so, I mean, ideally as early as possible, because the more, especially with some properties that, I mean, they sometimes come back and bite us and surprise us, just when I think I've seen it all, I have certainly not. But, ideally as early in the process, so we can kind of have those conversations, make sure everybody's prepared, what's going to be expected of them throughout the process. And the more we can get done earlier in the process, if I don't have bids, if we don't have HUD reports, if we have a consultant until a month and a half in, until I have something in front of me, I mean, our team can turn it fairly quickly, but until we have the data from all of the third parties, there's not a ton to review.
Yeah.
We get all of these pieces and parts in. Once we close on the loan, I'm not physically involved in the day-to-day. We handle all the post-closing stuff in-house as well. So we have a team that does that are the draw specialists and do the disbursements and work on that piece. I mean, I'm still here, and am I involved? I'm not privy to everything that goes on. And, if something goes wrong, believe me, then I will get the call. If I'm fighting with my contractor or what have you, then that's when I'll get looped back in. Other than that, it's just sort of monitoring the process post-closing. So, but we have a team from pre-qualification all the way to completion, and here's the pretty new house.
Yeah. Good.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. I mean, the process is smooth. I mean, they got it down pat. I mean, it's we've done quite a few of these together, and I can say for the most part, I mean, it's been smooth. I wanted to get a quick question, and I know we're getting to that timeline where we got to close, but man, this freaking show goes by too fast sometimes. But when you look at like contractors, because I'm glad you brought that up, right? I've seen it, not a lot. Most of the time it seems like it's smooth, but and RJ, we've got a contractor that we got to get hooked up with Tina as well. But like I've seen it where not every time, but I feel like it happens a couple times a year, that I've seen that I've been doing that where, clients have fired a contractor for whatever reason. And you think you vet them out, and can you touch on that a little bit? Like why you see that? Because they're like, oh, we got rid of my contract, we're going somewhere else, which makes it difficult because that contractor had a bid, one price that's approved, and they've got money, and now all of a sudden they want to.
Well, and it's extremely tricky post-closing because, some of the programs have an upfront draw.
Mm-hmm.
So, the contractor, and we don't approve contractors, we accept them. So we do a pretty thorough vetting, but I mean, we don't refer contractor, we don't tell you this, we don't give you a list, we don't tell you this is who you have to use. You choose your contractor. So you chose them. If you don't like them, I didn't choose them.
Right.
And it's extremely difficult because if that contractor has already gotten X amount of dollars and then they have a falling out, we have to do an exit inspection, what's been done, what hasn't been done. And if that amount of work hasn't been done, we need that money back, which sometimes happens, sometimes not. So now we're short on the budget, but we need another contractor to go through vetting on. So, I mean, ideally, everyone should do research even if they're hiring a contractor aside from this program. Check what you can check. Everything under the sun is on the internet now, but no one does.
We go to AI. Let's go.
Yes, exactly. So, but no one, very few people do, and I don't know why, but very few people do, and I think it's mostly because they come by referral, which is great. I mean, that's how business should be built, but that's the biggest challenge, and that's why I tell them, it's. Everyone wants to get a good deal, but it's as important that you have a good vibe with your contractor, that you feel like you can trust them. Something can still go wrong. They can have issues agreeing on things after closing. But at the end of the day, it's almost more important that they're comfortable with who they're working, because it's a big deal. It's their house. It's their home. So they should be more comfortable with that than focusing strictly on this one's a little bit cheaper sometimes,
Yeah, you pay for what you get is what we used to say, check, verify, and verify again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's important, this is good. I appreciate you doing this. Anything else you want to add? Any other pitfalls that you may want to add on there? I mean, you see so much, right? Here's what I'm going to break it down. If someone's on the fence about using a renovation loan, right? What would you tell them? They're afraid. Like what's?
As far as the process, I try to tell people just follow the process. If you just take it step by step, it flows very much like a regular loan. Yes, there are more moving parts and more cooks in the kitchen for us to pin down, but if you just take it one piece at a time, just like anything, it really moves through very smoothly. I mean, I think people make it more difficult than it is. If you have good support, also, if you have your realtor on board that is supporting and helping and all of that, that's extremely helpful. And when you're picking a contractor, try and get a referral from someone who you do trust that has worked with them and seen a job through. That's the best reference there is, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, you guys want to look at doing renovation loans, hit us up. We'll help you. We'll get you involved. We'll get you over to Tina once you're ready. But let us know so we can at least properly qualify you and make sure it makes sense. And then I'll let Tina run from there. Tina, I appreciate you so much for being on with me. I'm so happy that you're not AI.
I know. Surprise! I am a real person. I know.
Oh, it's good. RJ, anything you want to add before we close out?
Tina, it's great meeting you and really hearing from you on this topic. I know a lot of people probably have great angst when it comes to anything that deals with a contractor in the sentence. But, I know that you make it easy as possible for the customers. Really appreciate the knowledge drop.
100%. I'm going to put RJ, our contact, as we normally do in the chat here. And you know how to get a hold of us. And look, as always, you're looking to buy, sell, refi, you need an insurance quote, give us an opportunity to help you. We will take really good care of you. We love on people. I always tell people it's not sexy. We won't lie to you, right? That's old school values, but, take the time and go through a process. We don't want to just do a quick pre-approval. Now, if you need that, we can accommodate that. But I think at the same time, we want to build a relationship with you, get to know you, go over the numbers, make sure it makes sense. RJ is going to do the same thing, right, RJ? You explain your stuff. Right. Yes. That's why his initials are in the front. It's RJ and Sewell. Let's talk. Right?
The one great thing is that we hang our hat on educating the customer and helping them figure out what's best for them. And then that's the way we sell it. So give us a shot. you will not be disappointed.
Absolutely. All right, we'll be back next week. We keep it going. Tina, you gonna come on the show with us again one day?
Of course.
All right, because we've
I
done a lot.
enjoyed it. I've never done one a podcast, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, the thing is, it goes by so fast. Believe me, as we build this, you're going to get more and more people, and I'm sure we're going to have clients ask questions and things like that. So you send it through, we'll filter them through and get them answered. If we can't answer those right away, but I appreciate you for jumping on, especially you're a busy guy. I know you're dealing with a lot.
Appreciate you letting me crash the party.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Bye.